everybody. We're back doing the fourth in our audio commentary of the Spider-Man movies. This time, we're finally out of Raimi land, and both of us are pretty excited to talk about this one in part, just because, I don't know, it's going to be nice to talk about a movie that's got a very different sort of tone and feel to the past three movies. But yeah, this is going to be a similar case to last time. Let us know what you think about this movie in the comments. Let us know if you enjoyed our commentary. We'll give you the prompt in just a little bit to let you know when to start the movie if you feel like watching along with us. If there's not anything to add, then we can just go on three.
No, not at all. I just want to say I'm excited to talk about this, and I really like this movie.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's go in three, two, one. So I believe you mentioned that with the exception of number two, you saw all the Spider-Man movies in theaters. So what did you think about this one in theaters?
I thought this was pretty refreshing. Well, not, yeah, kind of refreshing to have a different take and a different tone. Um, when I saw this in the theater, funny enough, I wasn't allowed to.
Huh.
My grades were slipping, and so and my parents were very aware that Spider-Man was like my favorite thing. So they were like, "You can't see that movie in theater." So I go see Dark Knight Rises, and then I just stayed in the theater and snuck into a screening of this.
Wow. I actually, this is one of those things where I forget kind of just how relatively recent it is. And again, like you wouldn't think, well, I mean, 7 or so years ago is a pretty long time by movie standards anyway. And yet at the same time, this movie feels way older than it is alongside stuff that came out at the similar time, like Dark Knight Rises and Avengers, just because of how much stuff in this genre we've gotten in the meantime.
And I was very fascinated just by the fact that we were getting this movie because as a kid, I was like, this is around, well, like I told you before, Transformers is really where I get my like love of movies and behind the scenes stuff from, and where I start following movies more closely. So I knew this movie was being made really early on, and I remember seeing the first promotional photo of the new suit of Andrew Garfield in the new suit, thinking, "Well, that looks like a really interesting, like dark fan film almost."
Yeah, my experience my experience is actually fairly similar because I at around the time of this one's release, I was really big into following spill.com, which was a website for those who don't know where a lot of film reviews were posted and which is now kind of permutated into Double Toasted, who are active on YouTube and who you should totally follow. But they had posted a lot of film news on their site at the time, and so I heard about this when it was announced. I saw that same teaser poster when it came out. I listened to a lot of discussions at the time when Mark Webb was first hired as the director. And of course, everyone was like, of course, they get the guy named Webb to do a Spider Man movie. But at the time, because the main thing that Mark Webb was known for was 500 Days of Summer, it seemed very much that they would lean into sort of like the romance angle. And they did, and you can definitely see his handprints on those scenes. But I don't actually have the sharpest memory of how I felt seeing this in the theater. I know that I did, in fact, see it in the movie theater, but I'm not entirely sure how I felt about it beyond just general enjoyment. Not gonna lie, I'm not. If I were in charge, if I were doing my own Spider-Man story, like doing Peter Parker's parents and like making that a whole mystery is not something that I think I'd have chosen to do.
Well, the big reason that we do this is because the previous franchise didn't do it, and so
Yeah.
we were trying to. justify rebooting this franchise as much as possible with this film.
And I'll say that part of what I like a lot is that a lot of choices here are made with the express purpose of differentiating from the Raimi trilogy, and yet they don't like drag this movie down. Like I feel like this works all right if this is your first Spider-Man movie. Like you're not gonna be if you haven't seen the Raimi trilogy, you're not gonna be asking yourself, well, why were these choices made? They feel natural to what this movie is.
And if we're talking about just pure characterization, this is my favorite uh, live action interpretation of Peter, of Peter Parker and Spider Man. Like I honestly, now that I say that, I want to say he's tied with Tom Holland for me. But there are a number of things about his characterization and his motivations in the MCU that I don't really like. But everything we're doing with Andrew Garfield um, in this movie, I really like. This I don't know how realistic this is.
It's definitely not.
We
Like
just can't keep our mouths off each other.
even at teenagers most horny, I'm pretty sure you can just ask them to move and they'll move. That said, yeah, I definitely really like a lot about Garfield's interpretation of Spider-Man. I think maybe kind of because I feel like it's ironically a little bit of a commonality between him and Toby and Tom, where they're characterized their best, I think, in their first movie. Where
I
like,
like that we get to see um, like him stand up to Flash before he even gets his powers.
yeah,
But what I what I'm a little iffy on is like okay the bully like Flash even doing what he's doing to that kid even in 2012 I have a hard time buying.
yeah,
But
no,
what I buy even less is there's a crowd of people around him cheering him on as he does it.
yeah. Like the thing is, this movie is nominally in some ways going for a more of a sense of realism than the Raimi trilogy, and Flash's antics didn't even fly in those movies. And like the real thing is, like stuff like this doesn't bother everyone, and I think it's just because they're not like applying the same level of this wouldn't work in reality to it. The thing is, it's not that this is like not logically sound or whatever for the kind of world this movie is in. It's that if you live in New York especially where these movies are set and you've like recently been in high school, or even if you just keep up with the school system, then it becomes pretty obvious like this is something that would happen in a really bad school, the likes of which Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker likely would not attend.
And like being at public school, I've seen a number of fights that will draw a crowd. But you just bullying someone, I don't see that drawing a crowd.
Yeah, no. Like just walking up to like if it's like a drama thing, that'll draw a crowd. If it's just you going up and punching somebody in the face to prove your macho-ness, that's not gonna no.
We talked over the scene where he has his first like real interaction with Gwen, but I really like his mannerisms in that scene.
Yeah, I like his mannerisms all over this movie, like in every scene pretty much. And they really are to me what makes it hard to like sympathize with people who are like, "Oh, he's too cool." Especially in this movie, everyone's like, "Oh, he's so cool. I don't buy that he's a nerd or that he's socially awkward or whatever." Just he has all of these very, very awkward mannerisms. There's kind of an aesthetic to him that is not present in the second film, where it's like he's really not all that put together. Like, look at him, he slouches. He's very, I don't know. It's just I feel like people who are like, Andrew Garfield is too cool to be Peter Parker, or he projects too cool, are just being really, really shallow. Like just because Andrew Garfield is a more traditionally attractive dude than Tobey Maguire, they're like, I don't buy him as a nerd. but like look at his actual performance, and he radiates like even more awkward at times than Toby. Like a very different kind of awkward, but like I can
Yeah, I'd
totally
say he's almost more like antisocial before he's socially awkward.
yeah. Like if I went to high school with someone who acted the way that he did, I would totally buy that he gets bullied. Not by everyone, but like someone would definitely target him for behaving like this.
And he's not even bullied. He's kind of just a loner. He's, like I said, he's just more antisocial. Like, Flash isn't bullying him. Well, Flash does kind of bully him, but the person he's really bullying is that kid that Peter picks, like, stands up for in that earlier scene.
And some people, I'm sure some people would argue that that still is not, Peter Parker to them, and they don't like that he's like antisocial in that way. I don't know. I again, this is part of each of the different movie actors capturing a different facet of the character. Where Toby and Tom, will discuss more of what differentiates Tom later, but they both capture the kind of sweet, nerdy guy. But there is a lot of precedent in comics and other adaptations for Peter not always being the sweetest guy, for being a guy who kind of has a chip on his shoulder, and that's really encapsulated in these movies, I think.
And this doesn't mean he can necessarily play the character. I think he plays the character beautifully in this movie, and even in the second film. But like he was a genuine, like, he grew up a genuine Spider-Man fan. There's pictures of him like as a kid running around in a little Spider-Man costume. Like, he was a diehard fan that got to play this role.
Yeah. Like we had the whole clip in the scripted review of him at Comic-Con announcing this, and that level of passion really comes through in the whole performance, I think. No, not Cliff Roberts. That was last time. Martin Sheen, great. Uncle Ben. I'm sort of torn, honestly, between him and Cliff Robertson. Cliff Robertson is the more iconic one, but I get more of a feel for their relationship, and their relationship feels a little bit more complicated and nuanced in this movie.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I think this movie's taking a lot of cues from Ultimate and getting Martin Sheen and utilizing him the way they do, because Bendis' main reason for starting from scratch with the origin story when he did his Ultimate Spider-Man comic was, I want to spend time with Uncle Ben. I want you to really feel his death
Mm-hmm.
when he dies. I want you to get to know him before we rip the rug out from under you and kill
I like that. I like little things like that where like Peter has we really emphasize like the tech nerd more in this movie than we did in the Raimi trilogy, where it's like Peter just built all these little contraptions to like super lock his door or whatever.
him. Yeah, that's fun. We definitely we're having fun with the science aspect,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna get mechanical web shooters in this movie, which are awesome.
And like, I'm not gonna name any names, but there are people who I follow who for years and years and years have hated like this interpretation of the character, and I've never got it, especially with this movie, where they're like, it undermines his whole tech thing that he didn't even make the webbing, he took it from Oscorp. It's like he still made the shooter. Like, look around his room, and just like throughout this movie, we really emphasize like the sciency angle to his character. It's like, why do you buy that more with the Raimi interpretation and not this one where it's emphasized way more? Like, there's
Especially because, like, we got away from that entirely and did organic web shooters.
yeah, which I understand why you would do that for like streamlining the story and stuff, but still. And there's a particular bit that we'll get to that someone that I follow is like really bothered about, and I don't get it. But yeah.
Richard Parker. Now, here's the big thing that we're going to talk about, I assume, throughout this, and particularly in the second film. So we're exploring the Megan Parker death and why he wasn't raised by his parents, which um, in 616 they were shield agents, and even though that wasn't a particularly interesting story anyway, they couldn't have done it because they don't have the rights to MCU. So
Hmm.
they needed to come up with something for his parents, and they didn't know what. And here's why there's no excuse for this, because they started off this movie knowing they were going to have a franchise. You need to know what you're building
Yeah.
to. They don't
It's
know what
just
they're building to in regards to his parents, and they don't really know what they're building to in regards to Osborn and Oscorp itself. I mean, aside from Sinister Six.
yeah. That's really and like this. Admittedly, is number one in list of things that Peter does in this movie that's kind of not okay, which is
And pretending to be someone he's not.
and specifically like we linger on that guy getting pulled out of the building. It's like, oh, poor guy. But yeah, and I like that line, having trouble finding yourself.
But this is kind of cool. I like the idea of making Osborn like this looming shadow. Like we don't get to see him in this movie, but they don't have any idea where they're going or what to do with that character. So they just take him in the most
Yeah,
counterintuitive direction you can think of in the second movie.
and on one hand, you can say the MCU took a better approach in not mentioning Oscorp at all until they have an idea of what to do with them. And yet at the same time, that approach does, or we'll see ultimately if it pays off better in the long term in terms of like, okay, I'm glad we didn't like force Oscorp into the story, not having any plan worked out for where we're going with that. But it does also like it just feels right to have Oscorp be that looming shadow that's like influencing things behind the scenes, and even if it doesn't necessarily pay off, it just feels right for a Spider-Man story that Oscorp is such a big like factor, even if Norman Osborn himself isn't. Like that's one of the things that I guarantee you, a lot of people who don't quite feel the MCU Spider-Man is Spider-Man would not have that problem as much if Oscorp were a presence at all in those movies.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially because you could do, and I don't particularly care to do this, but you could do the whole, Osborn is the evil Tony Stark,
Yeah.
especially since I believe he like founds Dark Avengers, which is
Hmm.
essentially an Avengers team that's kind of like the superheroes and the boys, but run by him.
Hmm. Yeah. I'll say this. I like that this movie kind of straddles the line in the origin of like making it so that Peter actually getting bit by the spider is still kind of a quirk of fate, while
It's not
also,
even. Well,
I was just going to say, while also letting him be proactive. Like he's here because he decided to dig deeper into the mystery about his dad. It's not just he happened to be on a school trip and the thing came and bit him. And like I'm fine with that. Part of me really likes that part of Peter's origin is that it's not like because the problem you can maybe say with doing the whole Richard Parker being responsible for the spider thing is that it maybe removes a little bit of the everyman from Peter Parker, where it's like only he could have gotten these powers in the first place. He was destined, quote unquote, for this responsibility. When
and I
part of
don't
the
like that.
yeah, that's bad. Where part of the appeal of Peter is that he could
That
have
he
been
was
any
just a guy and this just happened to him.
yeah, like responsibility was not responsibility was not like laid out for him. It was just given to him, quote unquote, by fate, and he has to choose what to do with that.
This is really convenient. Like
Yeah,
he
this
happens
whole
to bump into this guy, and this is what'll lead him to the spiders.
it's pretty convenient that Gwen is the person who happens to be here since he didn't know that in advance. But yeah,
Yeah, that's one thing I will say about um, the first act of this movie is the first Spider-Man film was pretty short and sweet and getting him bit by the spider. This is like very convenient and very forced. I
yeah,
think.
I'm torn. I'm torn because on the one hand, yeah, it is very convenient, and also you're right. We're like double the amount of screen time that we were into the first movie where he's not yet been bitten by the spider. But again,
Which is fairly important because they want Uncle Ben. They want to spend more time with Uncle Ben than we did in the Raimi children.
and even just Uncle Ben, just Peter's whole status quo prior to getting those powers.
Yeah.
But like I said, I do like the aspect of it that it is Peter being proactive and like his decisions are driving the narrative forward up to that point. So like if you're going to wait to give him the spider bite, then in the intervening time he should be making important decisions. So I like that. Where there's not really like we get right into it in the beginning of the first Raimi movie where not enough time has even passed for you to worry about is your protagonist making proactive decisions. Here, if you're gonna spend the time prior to the initial bite, it is good that what gets him there is, him being a protagonist and pushing plot forward. Like, you know what would have maybe cleared up the whole convenient dropping of, although maybe the whole dropping the envelope thing still would have been a problem. I forget in the little articles that he sees, is it clear in those articles that Connors and Richard were working on spiders?
No.
Because if he saw that in the article of like, oh hey, my dad was working on spiders, and like he sees something on the trip that's like, oh wait, is that the spider room? And then he goes there.
Well,
That
we get an indication like early on in the opening scene where he's playing tag and his father gets him and takes him out of the house. We see it
right.
zoom in
It
on a
has
dead
that
spider
whole,
in like a glass canister.
and he has that whole whiteboard filled with spider stuff.
So Kurt Connors, he is of course the biggest issue with this movie, and I do agree with Captain Logan in that he should have had his family, and they definitely should have like taken the less is more approach and scaled back the big crazy climax at the end. He should have just had to fight Lizard as a monster in the sewers, and we didn't need a speechifying lizard guy that looks like Uba.
Yeah, and like I get that maybe because again, this movie comes out the year Avengers comes out. We're not quite in the comic book landscape that we are now. We're right on the cusp of it. But I still feel like even in this movie, with as grounded as it's trying to be, you could make Lizard look more like a lizard. You could give him like a snout and stuff, and you could keep him in the lab coat for a fight scene. That would have been cool. This guy, what is this guy doing? What are you doing?
Yeah, he sees a guy sleeping and is like, let me
No
just
one
fuck
would
with him.
do this.
Let me just mess with him a little bit.
No one would do this.
Especially in New York, I feel. Like maybe
Especially
you
since,
can speak to that better than I could, but
yeah, no. Especially since, because you know what? In New York, if you see someone sleeping on the subway, you're just going to avoid them. Like, and like, see, he's gonna be like, get your hand off, or like, you're not, you're not in a position to judge. Are you freaking kidding me? This guy's really over the top.
Yeah, this scene is
And
kind
like
of
it's entertaining. I do like get a kick out of this scene, and it's like a dynamic way of being like, "Oh, I have these reflexes now," but I just nothing about that guy makes any sense to me. Especially since he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would want to waste a beer like that.
yeah.
Yeah, that scene is super contrived, but I really like it. I don't care. I also like the track that plays over that scene.
Little reminiscent of the first film when he just runs after smacking the
Yeah.
sign.
I like that shot also as a quick little look at how literally small he feels. It is. That's true.
That's exactly what it is. It is a fly. It is indeed a fly.
I'd love it if he just went, yeah, that's what it is.
I like our Aunt May here, and I like that we'll talk about it when we get to the second movie. But I do like that there's some tension with them.
Yeah. I also another thing with the people who like say that this Peter is too cool. You've got people who say that he's just like a jerk and not a good person and like selfish and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, more than the other Peters, he makes sort of self-motivated decisions. But people who are like, oh, he's just a totally self-centered like jackass, like I don't see it. And like
No,
little
like
little
if that's what he is, he would not have bothered sticking up for that kid at the beginning of the movie.
yeah, no, and like little things like him being like, I'm sorry I kept you guys up, like I'm insensitive, I'm irresponsible. Like he's got a lot on his mind, and yet he still has the decency to be like, okay, I'm sorry, I apologize, you guys, I didn't mean to worry you and stuff.
And earlier, before the bully scene, when a girl walks up to him and asks him to take pictures of her boyfriend's car, he's
He
like,
could have
"Sure."
just he could have just been like, no, why would I?
This this was kind of weird. They didn't like this was a pretty major part of the teaser trailer.
Like
I
this
remember
whole
thinking, this is kind of interesting. We're doing like it made me think we were doing organic weapon again.
ah, I can see why you'd think that, yeah. I just like this whole next couple of bits of like I like that we spend some time again, unlike love that bit with the alarm clock. Unlike the Raimi movie, which very much sort of portrayed the powers as very fantastical, and like from the get go, he's kind of enamored with what's happening to him. And the MCU movies, which just skip the origin entirely, I like that we have a Spider-Man on film that's really spending some time on how the powers getting these would be very disorienting and a little bit horrifying for you.
Yeah, we are the puberty metaphor is pretty. It's more evident here than it was in Raimi's film.
Yeah, and like even beyond that, like this bit of him just sitting here and being like, I am sensing things that I should not be able to sense. Like I'm just getting sensory overload. I'm sort of terrified of my own room. Like it's genuinely kind of frightening, you can imagine, to have this stuff be going on with your body and you just have no idea what's even happening to you. And like we play it for equal parts like uncomfortable horror and also comedy, like all the bathroom stuff and what's about to happen with him and the the keyboard. And like even Spider-Verse doesn't quite do it the same way with Miles, where it's like Miles for him it's more of an inconvenience, where here it's like Peter is really just abjectly kind of terrified.
Yeah, all this stuff just works for me. I like Andrew in this role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, I like just how awkward he is. Even when he's like should be in a comfort zone talking to someone that he's comfortable with, he's just not the best communicator. Like he can't lie to save his life.
Yeah, I think in getting Mark Webb to direct this film, as you said earlier, they were definitely more focused on nailing the character drama and the relationships. And I guess they figured the superhero stuff will just come naturally. Um, there's only two action scenes in this film that I would go back to in a vacuum. Um, I don't, I don't think Mark Webb. I mean, he has a better, more realistic take on swinging. Spider-Man swinging in these movies is amazing.
Yeah.
But when we're talking just about the action, particularly with this first movie, it's not quite as strong as the best stuff in the movies.
Yeah, I really only have one action scene that I would go back to. I only have the one. You can point out the second one because I think it's we probably share one, but you can point out to me the second one that you have. But let's talk a little bit about Kurt Connors and Reese Ifans, however you pronounce it, because I feel like he gets maybe a little shafted. I don't know. Like he gets a
Yeah,
lot of screen time, and it's not like he doesn't have anything to work with. But of all the like major elements of this movie, you can kind of feel that his character maybe got the short end of the stick in terms of depth and stuff.
yeah, because we didn't give him his freaking family, and we don't see him. Imagine you're a dad and you're dealing with trying to take care of your wife and kids with a handicap.
Yeah, and like the lost arm in and of itself is a lot to deal with, but that extra little thing would go a long way to like
Yeah,
make.
but it only serves in uh, superficially having pity for the character. Like you don't really like he just misses having his arm. Like that's kind of all
Yeah,
there is to it. Like
yeah. Like
his family should be in this movie.
if he's like spectacular, where like the idea is like I want to be able to play catch with my boy. I want to be able to hold my wife properly. Like then that really sells you on the desperation to get it back. And like I don't want to make it sound like we're belittling the plight of people who maybe don't have immediate families like that and still have lost a limb. Like I'm not saying that you can't just really want to get your limb back and that's a perfectly like people who are just that desperate, like of course you would be. Losing a limb is a big deal. Like
But
I
we're not
know.
doing enough with that in this movie.
Yeah, no. And like who knows? Maybe I'll change my mind about that feeling watching it this time. But I always feel like if we just given him a couple more scenes that were more like just how does he really feel about stuff? I don't leave this movie feeling like I've got a great grasp of who this guy is.
No, we don't get a very good handle on this character, and you need to if you're going to do Lizard and have him be the main villain of your movie. We don't. You don't need to make the Lizard himself a speechifying character. I often hate that. The Lizard is just monster, but the person underneath that monster that Spider-Man knows and has a personal connection to, that's where the source of drama comes
Ooh,
from. This is a fun scene. This is a fun
yeah.
one.
And I don't know, is it Captain Logan or someone else who has like a take on this being like tying into the whole responsibility thing where he decides to sort of mess around with Flash like this and
Well,
then
that's not his issue. His issue with this scene is that people aren't questioning him being more than human.
no, but I don't mean even like an issue. I just
Like
mean
people
something
looking into the backboard thing and then
Yeah,
later on he dents the goalpost with a football, which wouldn't happen.
yeah. The goalpost thing especially, I can see bugging somebody, but I mean like in terms of he messes with Flash like this, and that's going to get Uncle Ben called in, and that's going to cause like indirectly Uncle Ben going out to look for him, getting shot, their whole misunderstanding. It all
It
comes
all
back
leads
to
back to his decision to do this. You're right.
yeah. And so like do we feel like because my first instinct to that being the case is to go like so that's the movie slash the universe of the movie saying that this right here is Peter being irresponsible. And true, that's correct. But I don't know. The idea that like the karmic justice of the world is going to get Uncle Ben killed because Peter decided to show up Flash when Flash was being really, really obnoxious. I don't know how I feel about that necessarily.
Well, I'm not even sure how much I'm with you on that, given we still do the Raimi thing, but in a different way. Or where instead of like him being at a wrestling arena and the guy not giving him the money he deserves and saying to him, "I missed the part where that's my problem," and then we get Peter later saying to the guy when he lets the robber get away, "I don't see how that's my problem." He says it's not my policy when the store owner guy asks him for help when he's robbed.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
It's not like we're pretending, that that's not. That's where the real mistake is. It's not that he decided to get back at a bully who was manipulating not only him but a number of other kids.
I'm
It's
sorry.
that
I like that. He's got you on his computer. I'm his probation officer. I like that. I like see that's what I mean in terms of like the nuance to the relationship that comes with getting them to spend more time together. Like Uncle Ben comes and like chews him out for being irresponsible here and like he's telling him off, but he's still able to have like a warm little funny moment with him where he like where he like pushes him towards Gwen and is like, "Yeah, go get him." He's not just like stern father figure and that's it.
Emma Stone is perfectly cast here. I love her as Gwen.
Yes. Like she really conveys even without words sometimes the intelligence to her. And like I think Emma Stone even from a younger age has always been great at sort of imbuing her characters with that kind of maturity.
And these two just have natural chemistry. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not surprised at all that they actually ended up dating in real life.
Mhm. And I like this kind of dynamic more than sort of like what would you'd expect to be the cliche, which is just that he pines for her, she doesn't even notice him, that kind of thing. Like again, like we've generally been pretty good in all three of these franchises about the romances and making them mutual and like you can understand what both parties see in each other and that kind of thing.
And I like this song choice. I ended up listening to this song a lot after seeing this movie.
Uh
I never heard of it before, but I like it.
I like it in the context of the scene. It's not really something that I would seek out and listen to on my own. And I also don't have what Cap does, where he reads a lot into the lyrics relative to Peter's arc. I'm sure he's right about them having that kind of relevance to what he's thinking, and that being the case, it's just smart filmmaking to put that kind of thought into it. But yeah, it's just not really something I think about.
That's fun. He sees the
Yeah,
star
I
swinging,
like that.
then he starts doing it with the chains.
Yeah, that's neat. I like that. And see again, in a very different way, we're doing kind of what the first Raimi movie did, in that we're letting the powers be a mix, or like his uncovering of them be a mix of sort of really upbeat and really cool and a little bit dark. Where in the Raimi movie, it's him finding out that he has the powers for the first time and experimenting with them in his room. That's the like really chipper part, and it's him swinging for the first time. That's the kind of dark part, because that's right after Ben got shot. Where here it's the other way around, where it's him realizing his powers in his room. That's kind of creepy and off-putting, and him swinging for the first time, even though it's not really on webs. It's like, oh no, this is the part of being Spider-Man that's kind of cool and stuff.
Uh, you talked over it, but that was our big setup
For
for
the
that.
MacGuffin, for the plot device that's gonna put the whole city in danger.
Yeah.
We also talked. We also talked over Ben telling him like pick up Aunt May and stuff, and he's disregarding that now. And this is again okay. Yeah, so I suppose I was wrong. It's not. It all does kind of indirectly stem from, like I said, him messing with Flash, but it's really a repeated series of irresponsible choices that eventually leads to him losing Uncle Ben. And again, that is something that is kind of shared with the Raimi series, where it's he he starts by wanting to get a car for Mary Jane,
Yeah.
and that's kind of a shallow, petty motivation. He lies to Uncle Ben about what he's doing, even though in that movie, Uncle Ben would have gotten shot even if he was not lying about going to the library. Here, it's he messes with Flash, and he decides to ignore Uncle Ben's call, and he lets that guy
This
go.
one released online.
Which one?
This one. Human trials aren't until next week. If you're still testing on rats, you're not even close to human trials, buddy.
Yeah, that's true. They should be like next month, next couple of months, next year, maybe.
And the only reason that we have that line is because the Indian guy is forcing him to move the project along faster because of Norman Osborn.
Yeah. Norman Osborn's like proxy in this movie.
Yeah. And he didn't die, so it's weird that we didn't get him in the second movie.
Ugh. Yeah, I like this. Also, I'm just gonna keep saying all the stuff that I like about allowing Uncle Ben to have more screen time, which is that we let to see him and Aunt May have kind of different approaches, where May's trying to kind of take Peter's side, and like I like it. It gives their relationship more of a real feeling that like they disagree about some stuff.
Yeah, I like that too.
And see here, I love this. I love the kind of the different spin on with great power comes great responsibility. And the people who like really dislike this movie that I know like get really, really up in arms about the fact that
He doesn't say it verbatim.
yeah, like they're really bothered about that, and I don't get it. Where it's like the sentiment is still expressed explicitly in dialogue. And like
And there's two things I really like about the fact they don't get it. I really like Andrew Garfield's delivery there.
yes, I wanted to say I didn't want to forget to talk about how great his performance is in the scene.
But yeah, the expressing that sentiment, like with great power comes with great responsibility. That's not something like that was always a great message for the character, but it never struck me as something anyone would actually say.
Especially since, and the thing that I've always wanted to point out to them is like, in the comics, initially, it's not said out loud, it's in narration. And also, it's a Voltaire quote. Stan Lee / Uncle Ben didn't come up with that line. It's a Greek philosophy thing.
And people just assume that because of the Raimi movie.
Yeah. And see, this is kind of stupid. This whole haggling thing, it's really dumb.
Yeah. I kind of like though that Uncle Ben ends up dying over something so small.
Yeah, no. This see, okay, this is another one of those. This is another one of those living in New York and like going to places like this constantly thing where it's like maybe it's because this guy is young and stupid. You would not get like repeat business at your deli if you refuse to let someone get a milk for 2 cents. Like this guy does not run a tight ship. He would not be in business if he operated like this constantly. But yeah, I don't want to forget to talk about the line itself being like if you have the power to do something, you have a responsibility to do that thing. And that I think actually explains what's going on right here, where some people complain about like why would he go grab the gun? Where it's like, well, what with what he just said, it's like this guy is a danger to people. He drops his weapon. Ben is standing right there. He has the power to go over there, grab that gun, potentially save people's lives. He's gonna do it. And
Yeah,
that I think is honestly
that's what
phrasing it.
that dichotomy too. That he dies trying to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. And phrasing it the way that he phrases it in this movie, I think makes it more explicit in like a real life applicable way than just with great power comes great responsibility. Like it's and I very much doubt that the way that MCU Peter ends up phrasing the same lesson was a result of this movie. But I do just in terms of what it actually means and applying it to a real kind of philosophy. I like if you can do something, then you should do it if it's the right thing to do. That is what responsibility means more
I
than
think
just
this is the only incarnation I've ever seen where Peter is actually there for his uncle getting shot. Like in the
Mhm.
Raimi movie, he shows up like I want to say maybe minutes after it happened, but he's there.
Yeah. And so he doesn't have the thing in this movie that Raimi Peter did, where he's just assuming a lot about the situation and
Yeah.
projecting onto it. And you can say whether or not that makes his quest for revenge more or less justified or makes it more or less relatable. I don't know.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think a large part of that is up to interpretation. Um, what's not though is how he handles it, because I think because another big criticism this movie gets is that he just drops looking after the killer. He specifically decides that's not what I'm about. I'm not about going out to find this guy and kill him.
Yeah, I have zero problem with that. Like I saw people reviewing Amazing Spider-Man 2 treating like who killed Uncle Ben like it was still some loose end and I'm like, "No. No, that's very much not the point."
And what's weird is in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 game, uh, that's kind of a significant part of the story of that game. I think is Craven um, is like an evil devil whispering in your ear and trying to convince you to go after your uncle's killer.
Hmm.
And we talked over it, but I
About
like that scene where he humanized Flash.
yeah. I really wish we could have found some way to bring him back for the second one because of the three flashes we've gotten, he is just in this movie the most complex and human.
And we had a solid scene of him in Amazing too. We just cut it.
Oh man, I forgot about that.
Yeah, he was at the graduation.
Oof. Yeah, see, in this whole thing, like, people, I can understand people feeling like maybe this goes too far, but I personally really like starting Peter from a very dark place of just hunting people and like if the guy matches the description, then he's gonna beat on him whether he's confirmed it's really the guy or not.
Yeah, this feels very much in line with Ultimate Peter, where he can be a jerk and he can be very impulsive and stuff.
Hmm.
Not even after learning the responsibility lesson, he's not a perfect person. There is still some. I mean, ultimately, he is still a hero and he's going to save people, but there's still a little bit of gray area to him. And it's a fine line to maintain that balance, but I think this movie does that really well.
Yeah, that was a little thing that I like. Him like jumping onto the wall, and then while he's standing on the wall, he punches the guy in the face.
Yeah. Now, this is obviously we didn't do the wrestling thing, so we're trying to differentiate it, but I like the nod to it. And I like that's where he gets the idea for the mask from. Fine, this movie.
Yeah, I like I like that the mask comes from a practicality thing. Like even before he's decided he's going to be a superhero or whatever, it's just I know what you look like. So he knows he's going to keep doing this. He can't keep doing this and have people see his face. So it's maybe a little bit convenient that I know what you look like looks up. There's a mask. Like he wouldn't have thought to make a mask anyway, just hearing the guy say that.
I've seen your face.
Also, I talked over it, but the earlier scene where Gwen hugged him, I think that was the first time that we hear the theme for like their relationship in this movie, and I really like that theme. Like, I don't love this whole
Very
soundtrack, but there's a lot of parts of it that I really like, and that motif specifically, I think, is really beautiful. Speaking of the score, though, I maybe think this is potentially a counterintuitive kind of like mood that we're setting with the music here.
I
Where
don't agree with that, but okay.
just because he's still very much in a dark place right now. Like, yeah, it's cool.
Him creating the web shooters is this like kind of whimsical moment.
Yeah, him making the web shooters, I'm fine with, and maybe even to a degree, him like this bit. Not necessarily what I mean. Like this bit is fine, but this montage is going to continue, and we're gonna kind of like keep this musical mood, even as what he's doing is hunting and assaulting people. But this is really cool. This is great.
Yeah, I don't know how you immediately shift out of it without being jarring.
Ooh, ooh. This is so cool.
Yeah, I remember getting really excited seeing bits and snippets like that. In the
Mm.
theater. And he's got like a nifty little police scanner that he made out of like a phone and other
Yeah,
kind
I also like this as like a start for that. Where again, like I'm really drawing a lot of parallels that I didn't even initially think to draw with the first movie. Where again, we start a lot of Spider-Man staples from kind of a dark place, and here it's like he's got a police scanner. The reason he has it initially is specifically because he needs that description of like who's the guy doing it so that I know I'm hunting the right people.
and we have our introduction to Captain Stacy here, who
Hmm.
I think it's interesting that we chose to kill him off in this film. Uh, Because like in Ultimate, when he's killed, it's immediately pinned on Spider-Man, and Gwen hates Spider-Man because she thinks that he did it. Why would it end up going that way with these movies? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. And these guys just talking about the physics of it, like that, that's what a fan would be talking about. I love this. I
Um,
had I
yeah, and
had
one
my
of the teasers, it was we got to see that whole sequence. It wasn't edited. I'm kind of two minds about cutting it down even for this montage.
mm, I do like what we have though.
Yeah.
And like I've in like the span of the 2 minutes since I've mentioned it, I've completely turned myself around on the music choice.
I wasn't sure we'd ever see it, but Spider-Man with a book bag is great.
Yes.
It's a classic Ultimate thing. Bendis did that like almost all the time.
Mm. But yeah, I had my whole thing in the in the scripted review about how much I love what we do with the suit as a symbol for like his heroic journey. And like this is kind of part one of that where us seeing him in the suit for the first time and like showcasing the suit comes in tandem with the first actual heroic thing he does, which is he doesn't just leave the guy alone, he takes the criminal and he gives him to the police.
And I don't think you can really complain about the cookie thing here. We're doing a lot of it in this movie, and Andrew's great at it.
Yeah, no.
And I remember seeing just a clip of this scene. I think it played on some like talk show for either Andrew or somebody else promoting the movie, and I was like, I'm in. So
I forgot about that. I forgot he yells crotch and then like does the Black Widow
the
move
Black
on him.
Widow move on him.
Yes. I like that. I like the web shooters light up red whenever he uses them.
Yeah, it's a really fun visual cue, especially during night scenes,
Hmm.
which most of his movies are at night. So
Yeah. I will say again, it is if people are like I can maybe kind of see a little bit now why people might think he's a bit of a jerk just because of like he didn't have to like torment this guy, especially since he hadn't even checked yet if it was the guy with the tattoo or not, and like this entitlement that he has over the police. But like I get why you would be like if you were, especially if you were a fan of Toby's Peter, and again how mostly altruistic and selfless he is right off the bat. If you bristle at this like of Spider-Man who really takes a while to get to the point where he's 100% heroic and altruistic and doing things for the right reasons, I really like it. I really like that as a choice.
so do I.
This costume, I feel very underrated. It's very different compared to all the other movie costumes, but I really like it.
The only thing that still kind of bothers me is the lenses. I don't like the yellow goldish lenses, or at least I'm fine with them now. My first few times watching this movie, that it took me a while to get used to that. Kind of, it was the only glaring aesthetic choice that I wasn't a fan of.
It works for me for the same reason that I mentioned that like the longer spider symbol works for me and just like the kind of lankier feeling that it has. Like it's we're gonna get to it in a moment, but like there's a bit where he's gonna like be crawling on the wall towards a guy, and I'm like, more than any other Spider-Man, I feel like if you ran into this guy in a dark alley with that suit, you would be genuinely put off and creeped out. Like there's something kind of creepy about the little yellow eyes that I like.
I love this moment.
Mm-hmm.
This reminds me so much of Ultimate, and why. And one of the big reasons I love Ultimate so much. Aunt May is his last family member, right? That he's got after Uncle Ben, and he puts her through so much hell because of all the stuff he's going through, and that he has to constantly lie to her about.
Yeah.
And they both know that he's lying, and he can't tell her the truth.
Yeah, like from the jump, even if she doesn't know what it is, she knows he's hiding something big from her. And like again, that's the difference in her and Uncle Ben's approach, where Uncle Ben would have grilled him about this, you get the sense, whereas she is just doing her best to trust that he trusts her eventually, and it's eating her up inside. You were gonna do it in a week anyway.
Yeah.
It's like that in and of itself is a pretty big rush.
How do you go from human trials aren't until next week to we need to start testing this now? I won't do it. It's unethical.
Yeah,
What?
especially like not even unethical. He's treating it like it's impractical, where he's like, where are you gonna find the people to volunteer? If you were gonna do it in a week, you would have had the volunteers already. There is no way that you were gonna like have trials a week from now and not have volunteers ready. Yeah, this is weird. Like his character is very underwritten slash inconsistently written.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of this movie that kind of has the same script issues as Raimi's earlier movies. Not in that like the exact same things or issues, but in that there's a lot of there's some inconsistent stuff, there's cheating, there's underrated characters, there's
Yeah.
yeah, pretty significant plot holes.
Especially since I don't know, just looking at this scene, I get the sense that they want it to be like, okay, he won't do the trials because he thinks they're unethical, and that's meant to make him more of a good person, and you can sympathize with him more, audience. And so when he falls down and like is in a desperate place, it feels it feels more tragic. But I
Problem
just
is, I don't know where that comes from. Like,
yeah,
I don't know why, like, that his attitude suddenly changed from the last time we saw him in the earlier scene to that scene where he's like,
yeah.
I'm not going to do it.
Why suddenly the
It feels
change?
like there's the scenes missing.
And I feel like honestly, you could make the argument it would make him feel like maybe at least more of a defined character if the guy, you know what? Switch this. Make okay, I'm gonna pitch this right now. Make Ratha, the Indian guy, be the one who's like, you can't do human trials in a week. Like, we don't even know if the formula 100% works yet. I'm not gonna let you do like an rushed, untested bootleg formula on Norman Osborn and have him be the guy like, do what we did with Octavius in the second movie, where he's like, I know what I'm doing. It's gonna work. I trust me. I know that this is gonna be perfect. And then he tests it on himself because they're like, we're not gonna let you do human trials in a week. That's crazy. And then he tests it on himself. And so it makes him look less sympathetic, but it also better defines his character and like gives you the sense that like he has this tragic flaw of like hubris and stuff. And it makes a bit more sense for the Oscorp guy to be like, No, we want you to test this and be thorough and make sure that it works before we rush it out to Norman Osborn. That's what I would do with it.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this when we get to the second movie. But Osborn needs to have more ambitions than just staying alive.
Yeah. Like his whole enterprise can't be solely built around ways to keep himself from dying, and that kind of seems like what it's like in number two. This motif,
And yeah, you put these two together, and
yeah,
it's just electric.
this motif right now is the one that I was talking about. Like, I will sometimes play this track to like go to sleep. I just really think it's really nice.
They have such a great back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And like, it doesn't feel shallow. Like, it doesn't feel like it's just bantering. You could say maybe they get to that place in number two. I don't personally agree with that, but some people made that argument. But like, I don't know. They, ooh, ooh, awkward. I love that. I love how awkward that is. You must be Peter. Yeah, this is Peter. I like that too. I like that he's not immediately like in defensive, overprotective dad mode. Like he sees that his little girl has like a friend, a boyfriend in her room, and he's like, "You want to join us for dinner?" It's only when they start like disagreeing on things that he's gonna start having a problem with them.
And I like that scene a lot.
The dinner scene when we get to it, yeah.
Yeah,
Again, that's gonna be one of those things where people are like, "Oh, he's so rude and he's so like selfish and stuff," but like he goes out of his way to like apologize for any rudeness and like we'll get to it, but just sometimes I feel like people are watching a different character than I was with this movie. Yeah, see, like I kind of do empathize with him here, and like I feel happy for him when he gets his arm and he's like so happy about it. But I can only imagine like how much more it would have landed if we'd one given it more room to breathe. Because again, this is maybe the downside to just doing this as a movie in the first place. Not to say you couldn't have make it work, but just with the pacing that we're trying to do here. In Spectacular, he gives himself the arm and he's able to enjoy having the arm for a while before he turns into a lizard monster. Here, he gets the arm, not even 30 seconds later, he's in lizard mode. Like,
yeah,
I feel so bad for this actor and this character. There is a lot of pathos here, and it feels like he is the part of the movie that we just don't care about as much.
yeah. I mean, for whatever reason, we didn't even. But I know I keep harping on this, but I think, I mean, it's a reason he was given a Grammy in the first place over most of Spider-Man's other villains.
Hmm.
And with the motif of Peter losing his family, there's something you can do with that.
Yeah. It's a real shame that this franchise, or at least this movie, gets so many things right, and yet it's kind of the outlier as far as not even just movies, but like takes on Spider-Man in general by having its villains be so weak.
But like Spider-Man himself is nailed so well with Andrew Garfield and the majority of the stuff he's given that it I find it really disheartening that people like in other fellow Spider-Man fans look at this incarnation with such hatred.
Yeah. Although to be fair, I tend to see more ambivalence than I do hatred. Like, of course, there's a group of people that really, really like at least this movie and really, really like Garfield's performance. the hatred I mainly see comes from number two, and maybe that like bleeds or like splashes over onto this movie from number two. The same way that, like as we were talking about in the earlier movies, people's kind of like dismissal of number three kind of hits the first two movies. But like I don't know.
We've talked over most of the scene, but I really like that Peter is kind of in denial here about what he's really doing.
Yeah,
And Gwen's dad pretty much lays it out for him like, hey, he's not really protecting innocent people. He's just going after some guy. Like, he has a personal vendetta,
yeah.
not a hero.
And like, see, I mentioned it earlier. I like that. I like. I'm sorry if I insulted you. That was not my intention. And just, I like how that whole discussion felt really natural to me, where it's like neither of them really start from a place of like wanting it to be like a whole fight. It's just like Peter makes kind of a like defensive comment, and because it's his job, I get the sense that that's like a thing where he's the man of the house, Captain Stacy, and it's not that he has anything against Peter, it's that he doesn't like being questioned about his job. He's like, I know what I'm doing. I'm a veteran in my like profession. I
Yeah,
know
what
more
do you
than
think
you
I do
do.
all day?
Yeah. Like don't tell me what I do and don't know about my job, kid. Like I get the feeling that Peter like struck a nerve there and the conversation like escalated from that.
This is really fun. I like that he can't get it out. He can't just come out and tell her, so he shoots the
Yeah.
weapon, pulls her back.
I love just how bad at communication he is.
Because this is like the most interactive he's been with anyone outside of his family, I imagine, in his entire life. Like, he is kind of a social outcast.
And so show don't tell.
Yeah.
Stop her before she can process.
He just tells her to shut up.
And is that the first naming of him as Spider-Man in the movie?
Say that again?
Is that the first time that he's been called Spider-Man in the movie? Did she just like come up with that? Because her little brother earlier said that Spider guy. And I don't think we've seen or heard the name used before this scene.
Yeah, I think so.
It's a little bit weird if she just came up with that off the top of her head. And that's maybe eh, yeah, see, we're gonna do the thing with her that I wish we'd have done with Mary Jane, and like we're gonna do it across both movies, where as soon as the romance starts, he has to go leave to do hero stuff, and immediately Gwen is like, "Oh boy, this is what my relationship is going to be, isn't it? Like we're going to be together, and then he's gonna go off and put himself in danger."
And
And
we
I
have to
like,
talk about that in this movie, as opposed to ending on that last shot in Spider-Man 2, and then we might as well not even done that when we get the 3.
yeah, and like I like that we're gonna connect it to her relationship with her dad, where it's like I already have a figure in my life who I love who does this and endangers themselves constantly. You think I want two of those? And yet it is exactly that thing that draws her to him, that like heroic instinct that he has. And like, okay, we talk about like action scenes that we do or don't like. I really, really like this scene, just not necessarily as an action scene.
Yeah, because there's not really a lot of action in this scene. It's just him saving.
Yeah, and as that, it's freaking great.
Yeah,
Right. So we're we're generally kind of consistent about like how intelligent Connors is in lizard mode. Like he still has his brain. I like that. I like all of the web like dangling cards next to each other. But yeah, like we're generally consistent about like how intelligent and methodical Connors is with the even in lizard mode. I'm kind of not sure what exactly his end goal here was. He's gonna kill the guy, and then what? Like Osborn's not gonna have another guy.
Yeah.
Like
What's
Oscorp is
that
not.
solved? Like he wants to tell the guy that he got the formula working, I guess, so he can start mass production or whatever. I don't know, but
Hmm,
what is killing him going to do?
yeah,
That's clearly
maybe
what
he
he's there to do.
maybe he's just volatile and angry and wants surface level revenge. But whatever. This scene is brilliant, and I know somebody. I think it was a Blockbuster Buster complained about it because he didn't like that it was quote unquote ripping off a scene from Batman Beyond where Terry has like a kid trapped in a car in like a precarious situation, and he's like he takes off his mask to get him to trust him. But I like the added wrinkle that he tells him to put the mask on,
And that's
and
why I think that's happy coincidence and not necessarily ripping Batman Beyond off. Who
yeah,
knows if they even saw that when they made this?
yeah, the him putting the mask on, and like Peter seeing that kid with his quote unquote face coming up to him. That is such an important moment. Like it had to happen like this. It'll make you strong. I love that.
This is one of the best scenes in the whole movie.
Hmm. This is one of the best scenes in all of these franchises, I think. And like when he gets him back to his dad, and he's like, "I just did that. That was like my first actual act of heroism." And like staring at the mask in his room and being like, "What does this thing actually mean?"
And I like that Peter's strength is represented as being a little more, well, significantly more limited than it was in previous movies.
And more limited than it will be at a lot of points in the MCU. Yeah, I love this. This is just perfect to me. Like nothing wrong with this scene. Yeah, I would have liked for that to be the first mention of Spider-Man as opposed to what potentially might not have even been scripted, what might have been just Emma Stone.
That's a comic book cover.
Yes. Like him staring at this and being like, "Okay, I'm Spider-Man. What does that mean? What am I going to do with this power now?" And this is him deciding like, "Great power, great responsibility. All right, Uncle Ben, I'm going to do it." But yeah, I would have liked for that to have been the first mention of the name Spider-Man. And like I was only able to even tell that that's what Gwen said because of subtitles, but I don't know. Like, that's just such a little thing that I would have.
I mean, going back to this movie, I never thought she was actually saying Spider-Man in that scene.
Me either. Yeah,
Yeah, I thought she was just gonna say like you're the, and then like Peter cuts her off and then they kiss.
I never even heard clearly what she was saying, but looking at it with subtitles, she says, "You're Spider-Man," and he's like, "Shut up," and I'm like, "Ooh, man, do I wish we'd have held off on using that name." Because him being like looking at the father and the son, and it's like the guy looks at him and it's like that's a proxy for his dad, a proxy for Uncle Ben, looking at him, and like again, tying back to having trouble finding yourself. After watching that kid with his mask coming up to him, a guy looks at him and says, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I know who I am. I'm Spider Man. I'm a hero." And it's, I love it so much.
This feels like a scene. Well, one of the many scenes were straight out of Ultimate, where Peter and Mary Jane are in the bleachers.
Mm.
And like early on, we put them together, and like she already knows who he is, and he can vent to her and tell her about stuff, and they have a really nice day.
Yeah, I really love this conversation. Like, if you don't get it, this is us just saying in dialogue that how transformative of an experience that was for him. And like, I like that Gwen's first instinct is to be a little bit like prioritizing him first and being like, even
That's
if
not
that
your
thing,
job.
yeah, even if that thing is endangering people, like you can't put your life on the line. It's like, again, it's just ah, in so many ways that don't just feel like. And see, yeah, that's a
No,
problem. That's a
no,
problem.
yeah, no.
But in so many ways that don't just feel like we've got to be different from the Raimi movies for difference's sake, this movie really feels like, okay, what did those movies maybe not do? And how can we take advantage of it? So, like, giving Uncle Ben and Peter's relationship more time to breathe, having a focal point of the romance being, oh no, my love interest puts himself in danger every day. Let's talk about that. Like, those movies didn't do that. And it's good to have a rebooted take where we can focus on those things. I'm really interested if whatever the next quote unquote MCU Tom Holland Spider-Man movie is, because at this juncture, no matter what happens, I'm pretty 100% certain that Holland and Babylon and Zendaya are all still on, even if it is just a Sony movie. I'm really interested to see if we tackle that same sort of thing with that MJ. And like, oh man, I was not I'm not sure how I can handle the person I love putting themselves in danger constantly.
I mean, she knows that going into the relationship before they even start dating. So
Or at least strongly suspects it.
yeah,
But again, that's one of those things where, like, what I would have preferred to be the case at the end of Spider-Man 2, where it's like, it doesn't really sink in how real that is until you've seen them almost die, like, straight up. And,
and
like, oh, sorry, you go first.
I was just gonna say, oh wait, I'll get back to that, but this little bit here, pretty pretty wild.
I like this. I like how creepy this is. Ah, that's great. That said, uh, Captain Logan has his whole complaint about the fact that we're doing the villain being a father figure for Peter again. And I don't share that complaint just because their relationship is so thin in this movie.
Yeah,
Like, is it
I don't
just,
think it's a stretch to even call him that, really.
yeah, like he's an older male figure that Peter respects, but he's not even really a mentor.
Yeah,
Like,
not even close to
so
being a
much of what we do with Peter and Connors like together is like forwarding plot stuff. Like, I like this. Like, this is a kid that he just had a big fight with, and he's saying stuff that does not sound remotely plausible, but he's going to give him the benefit of the doubt anyway.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
And like I like just how, because we're complaining a lot about Connor's stuff specifically, it really doesn't drag this movie down too much for me just because of how up to now background it's been, because this movie has been very, very, very character focused on Peter.
Mhm.
Like again, I'm gonna point this out whenever it remains true. This is a movie that feels like it's moving at a pretty like solid brisk pace. I would not like if I hadn't been checking the time, I would not have imagined that we're almost 2/3 of the way through, or at least well over the halfway mark. And yet at the same time, it doesn't feel like we're dragging our feet. Every scene, even the ones that haven't worked as great, has felt relevant.
Well, maybe, but this movie, I would argue, feels a little more rushed than Raimi's first film does. And I would also argue that, I don't know, at least for me, this movie um, feels its length a little more than Raimi's first movie does.
Again,
I'm not saying that it's too long, but I am saying that I don't necessarily agree that it's paced as quickly as you're insinuating it is.
it's definitely not as well paced as I would say the first two Raimi movies. Like I maintain that those two movies are masterpieces of pacing. Just this one, like I don't feel like we're wasting time. The big again, it all comes back to the moments that I do feel like are maybe a little bloated are the Connors stuff. Just because we're not really getting a lot of emotion out of those. But
I
this,
love this scene.
yep, I love this. We mentioned this briefly in the last one. This is so cool. Like that he's and this movie I think does an interesting thing that I wish more takes on Spider-Man would do, which is have him be more spider-like at times, where like he creates a web to catch his prey. And we'll see a moment later in the best fight scene of the movie where it's like he kind of goes into quote unquote spider mode, where it's like,
When he crawls up the lizard's back and webs
yep,
him up.
it's like getting bit has kind of turned him into a little bit of an animal, and it's really cool. Also, how like late 2000s, just like right before iPhone phone game do you have to get? Like that's one of the more dated things in this movie is just that phone game.
Yeah, I mean, but it was dated at the time this movie came out. That's kind of what I love about it.
That's true.
It's so cool. And like this pose he gets right here, boom.
That mhm.
Yeah, I love that. That's a pose that like straight out of the comic. This is one of the coolest visual scenes in the movie, but
Yes.
immediately undermined by the later half because it's kind of the weakest and most anticlimactic fight scene in this movie.
Mm,
Like this scene right here,
yep.
it's not long enough, and it's nowhere near as exciting as it should be. Like it just, I think that this scene would be greatly improved if it just lasted longer.
Yeah, like this whole bit on the web with the camera flashing, like this is really tense and cool. And when they get in the water, you're right. It's like, well, what really? How much can you do in the water?
Yeah, like I like that his web isn't working, and he's fighting something that can swim a lot better underwater than he can, and he can't breathe underwater. Like, just have that scene last longer.
Yeah, like I keep thinking about this movie as being like it has the one or two really strong fight scenes. That's not even really what it is. It's just that those are the only fight scenes.
He says that sucked. I'm like, yeah, I agree. That sucked. That was an awful fight scene.
It's like I don't even go that far because it wasn't even really a fight. It was
Yeah,
like a threat scene, which is like fine, fine to have those, but again, we are well past the halfway mark, approaching 2/3 mark of this movie, and we've yet to have a fully fledged Spider-Man versus villain action sequence. And that's not necessarily a problem. I can accept that, but it feels weird.
Yeah, and I always dig major body damage on the hero's costume. The
Hmm.
palm marks, of course, was a nice touch. We That's something that I really like about the Daredevil show. Like whenever he gets cut or bruised, like it stays and it gets like it slowly heals over the course of episodes, which is really cool. That they're paying that much.
I like her face. Yeah, her facial expressions are hilarious.
Yeah, it's really cool that the Daredevil show is paying that close of attention.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that. I love the go-to excuse whenever you want to get out of a situation and you're a teenage girl. I have cramps. Like there's this Disney show that I am shocked got away with something similar, where someone just really wants to leave a conversation and they're like, "I have cramps." And I'm just like, "Yep, that's the go-to way to get out of a situation. I'm menstruating." Yeah, see, I think just like the Raimi movies to a degree, especially two, we had like I think the filmmakers' priorities are really coming through in that they want to be focused on the human drama and Peter's personal growth and the relationship stuff, and all that stuff works great. And the downside is because Connor's and like the superhero action stuff is not a priority, it comes out really weak.
yeah,
So
and
like
we
they
don't really. I think we still. I mean, Homecoming managed it better, even though I think ultimately that movie doesn't have action scenes anywhere near as exciting as Raimi's trilogy or even some of the best stuff in these movies. But
Homecoming, Homecoming we'll talk about when we get to it. I think it certainly is a matter of perhaps in that movie just the director not being an action director. I also think a lot of it is circumstantial. Like a lot of the scenarios in that movie don't lend themselves to being like as good action sequels. Like we'll talk about it when we get to that movie. But like
okay,
I have a theory that just like a lot of the action sequences again either aren't long enough or just aren't hero versus villain fight stuff like with this movie where when we get a straight up hero fighting villain it's pretty cool but we haven't had it yet.
I like that we get into Gwen's character here. It's I like MCU Mary Jane, but um, a big issue that I have with her is that we kind of don't know enough about who she is and where her characterization comes from in a way that we don't really have with this Gwen or even Raimi's MJ.
Yeah, which again we would have at least an indication of had they not deleted this one scene from Homecoming, but we'll talk about that movie when we get to it.
Yeah. Um,
This is weird.
yeah. Now he's suddenly part Green Goblin.
Yeah, like if this is just like for the audience's sake, like it's not like he's having like a second voice in his head, just his thoughts are frenzied. But yeah, I think that's meant to be the indication, not like he's got like a lizard persona talking to him, but like just his mind is all over the place and we're hearing his thoughts because we're the audience, then fine.
And I really don't like this. I
It's
really wish
it's
it
kind
was
of over the
this
top.
bad and just made him a monster.
Yeah, like it's his delivery is really over the top.
Yeah, it feels like a Power Ranger scene that was just thrown in this movie.
That said, uh, here we go with the action scene that I really like, and something that, with as much as we've emphasized MCU Peter staying in high school, something I'm shocked that we have not done yet, which is a fight scene inside of the high school.
And now that seemingly the whole world knows who he is, I'd be shocked if we didn't get one. If you get a
Yeah,
proper people far from home.
like I mentioned to you that I'm doing like a proposed like third MCU Spider-Man movie idea, and like I might even make that a video. Like I went out of my way to be like, let's just do a fight scene in the school because obviously that would happen.
And we do it a number of times in Ultimate.
It happens in Spectacular.
Yeah, and it's so much fun when we do it there. We get a lot of mileage out of having fights at your school.
And again, like this setup allows you to do the thing that I praise the best fight scenes in the Raimi movies for doing, which is that it's not just a punching contest. It's not just hero fighting villain. Because of where they are, there's a third factor that has to be taken into account, and Peter has to be kind of careful.
I do kind of agree with Cap that um, the music for the scene could be better. It almost feels like it doesn't belong here for a large portion of it. Um, I rescored this scene. I want to eventually post this and see if Sony will let me keep it up or not, or if it'll be a copyright strike. But I took the theme from the PS4 game for the demons.
Yeah.
I put that score in this scene instead, and it works a hell of a lot better.
Yeah, and that's another problem with Connors, being that he's, I think, the only Spider Man villain in these movies who doesn't have at least a solid musical theme. Like, a lot of people hate the electro theme in number two. I like it personally. I think Green Goblin has a great theme, Doc Ock has a great theme, Sandman, Venom, Electro, Mysterio, Vulture all have really, really great, like, memorable, hummable musical themes. And I can't even tell you what Lizard's theme is if it exists. This
Oh,
is
right
great.
here,
This is perfect.
this is amazing.
Yeah, see, like this, I still would have liked to go on longer, but I think it's a pretty cool fight.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
I'm gonna throw you out the window now.
What? And we are about to get one of my favorite Stanley cameos.
Yep. Ah, it's so cool.
So much fun.
See, like it's stuff like this that lets you know they know how to do great action, and it's I can't even blame the movie for waiting this long to get here, just because the stuff that it decided to spend its time on instead has been really, really good. It's just maybe this movie could have used like another pass or two to be like, maybe if we have to add on a few minutes, but we got to do something to really like really sell the Connor stuff because
This is like the FaceTime thing that Eric is always complaining about. He's in a school. There has to be cameras all throughout the school. Why did he take off his mask?
yeah, like even without cameras, like everyone ran out of here when Lizard showed up. There should still be like some adults running around, and like the fire department, they're gonna get in there eventually. What if they see him? Yeah, and that's such a short bit. He really didn't need to take his mask off for that scene.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, at least he is alone in the building.
He don't have
It's
to
not
hide.
as it's not as egregious as the end of Far From Home, where he's standing out in the open with MJ in full Spider-Man costume with his mask off.
Yeah, and like he could have his mask off here in the sewer, and it'd be fine.
Yeah, here it's fine. There's no one else there. And plus, if he was wearing the mask, his voice would be muffled, and he's trying to talk with his phone. So
And also, I like that. I like that without even talking about it, without even like making a big deal out of it, Peter's like, Gwen is smart. I can trust Gwen to help me with this. He's not taking all of the responsibility for himself. He is
but
saying,
he also finds out when the situation gets dangerous. Like he tries to tell her to leave, and he's like, "No, I'm gonna get everybody out."
yeah. But I do like that he gives her the chance to contribute. Like he brings her into it to begin with. And see all this stuff. I feel bad for dogging on as much of this movie as I have because I do really like it. It's just it's the one big thing about it that just is not working for me, which is the main villain. Where right now I'm like, humans are weak, pathetic creatures. Where is any of that coming from?
Yeah,
Like any of it. It makes more sense with Norman in the first movie than it does here.
this is all generic villain, and you gotta have an evil guy for Spider-Man to fight.
Hmm.
And they should have went the spectacular route and just not done any of this at all. The lizard doesn't have to be a sentient, speech-implying character. He could have just been a monster that Peter has to find some way to stop without killing.
I will say, for the most part, the effect holds up. To say one positive thing about the lizard, the effect is pretty neat, and that close up of his face was really, really good. That holds up a lot.
Yeah, he looks like he's there. He just doesn't look great.
I would have had him wear the lab coat for the school fight. I don't care if it would have been stupid. Part of the appeal of the lizard is that he's a giant lizard in a lab coat. Just do it.
And I'm not going to complain about them now since they chose to go with this speechifying sentient lizard route. Because as realistic as this movie's trying to be, or at least it's trying to be more realistic than Raimi's trilogy. So
You know what?
you can't have you can't have lizard with a snout and talk.
Yeah, but like you might have a point there though, where it's like if we're going to ultimately shaft Connors as much as we do, and clearly our priority is with Peter and Gwen and like all of that stuff and all the very personal stuff, and we don't really want to make this like an action movie, just drop the pretense and like have Connors be more background and have the lizard be just a raging monster and have if you're just going to keep it to like one or two token fight scenes in the third act of the film, fine. Make the first two-thirds of the movie the personal like Spider-Man origin growing into a hero stuff, and then the third act can be we don't even have to bother setting up like a flimsy motivation or whatever. Just have him fight a giant lizard who is going around the city like brainlessly endangering people. That honestly might make the movie better. Mother
Uh,
Hubbard.
and we're about to get some really cool swing. Yeah, right here.
This is great. I love this.
Yeah. And Mark talked about how he walked around buildings and thought about how this would actually work and how you would connect the buildings.
Yeah,
You
that's
can
so
see it.
cool.
Yeah. You can see the thought they put in. And interestingly enough, in the game for this movie, um, it doesn't really have that same nuance. You can just shoot web straight in the air.
Yeah. Oh boy. Ow.
It's a good thing we're using taser guns and not live ammunition.
For now, until what? For like the next 2 minutes.
And this is the other scene I was talking about. It's really short, but it is actually either Andrew or his stunt double going around knocking these cops around.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I will say, though I am still enjoying this movie, I think it maybe has the issue that some other origin movies have, like Iron Man and stuff.
Oh, this right here, this is one of my favorite edits in the whole movie. Like that zoom up and then,
Ugh.
yeah, it's really cool.
But yeah, I will say I do think this movie has an issue that is not in every origin movie, but in enough of them where it's kind of got a weaker back half just because Peter's basically completed his growth already at this point. Like, really, Peter completes his growth as a character for this film in the bridge scene.
The score here is really strong. This scene right here in general is really strong. You gotta trust me on this.
Tell your people not to fire before you let him swing off, though.
Well, I mean, at that point, he thinks he's knocked all of them out until one of them gets up and it's too late.
Ah, darn it.
And I like that. I always like when you have to send the hero in for the final battle as the underdog. He's got some kind of. He's not 100%. We do that with Iron Man in his first movie, where he's using an outdated arc reactor.
Yeah. That's another movie. That's kind of another movie I'm thinking about that has this, where, like, the second half is not bad, but it's weaker because, like, the character finishes their growth partway through the movie. So, like that one, Peter has kind of grown all he needs to in this film with the bridge scene. And so,
I don't think that's inherently an issue so much as the movie being more plot driven and
yeah, that's not
inconsistent.
an issue. That's fine. If that's what happens, then that's perfectly all right. The issue becomes then what we're left with to drive the movie forward is Connors.
And the plot stuff in general, which um,
This is good, though.
I don't care for the horror movie like violin stings, like even being a major horror fan, I'm like, you don't need that. But
That would feel more appropriate if this was just straight up Monster Lizard.
yeah,
I do like that, though. I like that this never actually becomes like a damsel in distress situation. He's not interested in her at all.
yeah, we'd be very clueless like that.
This does, you know what? This does bring to mind another Connor's problem, though, which is that maybe he should have an interest in her. Where we had the thing earlier where Captain Stacy was like, Connors wrote Gwen's recommendation. When I read it, I cried. It's like the two of them have a relationship, and nothing is done with that.
Oh no, but maybe that's the main reason he decides not to even bother with her.
Maybe it's possible, but I don't even want to read into it that much just because up to now Connors has been such a non-character.
Yeah, and which again, the only big lingering, well, yeah, the only big major issue with this movie is Connors, for me anyway.
Yeah, if he's really the only problem I have, it's just he's such a big part. He's really a big issue.
How do you feel about this this upcoming training scene? It is kind of there. You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us.
Yeah, it's a little cheesy to me in the sense that it has vibes of that scene and it doesn't fit because the world of this movie is not the world of those movies. But I do like the thing of Spider-Man that I always like is that
He inspires people.
he inspires people and people like pay it forward back to him. Like that's a thing that I always like is that when he cultivates a relationship, he Spider-Man should be like Superman in that he doesn't he's one of the heroes that will like stop and cultivate a relationship with the community that he's saving and will really do that in number 2, and that's one of the things I like about Amazing 2 a lot. And so he doesn't just inspire people, people will like help him out when he needs it. And that's good. And it's like it's a little cheesy for the tone of this movie, but as a general Spider-Man thing, oh no, Spider-Man is in trouble. Let's the citizens who like Spider-Man help him out. That's I like that.
I really like this. Yeah, I like that we have a reason to include the city, and this scene right here I always thought was really strong, especially my first reading of the film.
Ah boy. Almost, but no. Yeah, see it's stuff like that that I like. Even if it's not necessarily like stuff like this where it's the pay it forward thing. I just like whenever in any superhero movie we emphasize like the fact that the heroes saving people impacts them.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite bits in the first Avengers movie is when the Avengers have done their thing and there's all the collateral damage and you've got people on TV going like, well, everything's freaking broken and stuff. Well, what are they? Then they just leave. What are we supposed to do now? And you've got the one lady at the cafe who's like, "What do you
Captain
want me to
America saved
say?
my life.
Captain America saved my life." It's like just anything in any of these movies that's like, "Oh yeah, these little people exist, and like this is why we have superheroes, so that when they do stuff like this, it impacts people." And that can be inspiring them, or it can literally be just as simple as reminding the audience that real flesh and blood people who might have died are alive because of our characters. And that's such a good feeling to have.
This is a cheesy line that he delivers so matter of fact.
I don't know. I feel like he knows how cheesy it is. Like he's being kind of snide when he says that. This is interesting. I'm having a thought now that never occurred to me
Mm-hmm.
where he sees just how concerned Gwen is for Peter, and I gotta believe that to some degree he understands that him being in danger is a big deal for Gwen as well. When we get to the end and he says keep Gwen out of it, how much is that being like keep her out of it because it is going to have an emotional like turmoil on her. Like being together with you as you do this is not great for her just because she is going to constantly be worried and stuff, and that's why I want you to keep her out of it.
Yeah, and she already does that with him.
Hmm. That's a nice little again. It adds layers to their relationship. It adds layers to his character, and we don't have to like like just exposit about it.
Um,
This is pretty neat. I always whenever this fight is on, it's always better than I remember. Again, maybe a little too short. I don't know.
yeah.
And
Um, yeah, like here we break the webs, but yeah, for all intents and purposes, the fight scene is more or less over.
yeah, and like that's going to be consistent with number 2, where I'm gonna like a lot of action beats in Amazing 2, but for the most part, I'm gonna be like, man, these fights just kind of start and then they're over, aren't they?
And like, I'm not saying we necessarily had to do this in this movie. And at the very least, at least we have a malfunction that he has to improvise on the fly on with Amazing 2. But Far From Home, being the first fighting movie where he finally runs out of web shooters,
Yeah.
kind of crazy looking back. Like I didn't think it would take us that long to get to web shooters malfunctioning.
Aim for the head. You've got this if you aim for the head. Aim for the head. Come on.
He can't do that because
Oh, never
he
mind.
needs to die. Yeah, there you go. He needs to die. So of course he can't. I will say though, Blizzard is basically Wolverine, so
Huh.
his head would have grew right back.
See, man, just never have I enjoyed a movie this much and found its villain this weak, I don't think. Where like he's so desperate to stop Peter from like doing this, and my only thought right now is like, man, I barely even remember what you want to do, why you want to do it.
I
Like
want to turn everyone into lizards because they'll be better somehow.
I just, man, like I feel so bad. This is such a great actor, and he's given such a nothing character in a movie where everyone else gets to give pretty good nuanced performances.
And I, I mean, I buy it. At the same time, I am a little conflicted on him being the one to save Peter just because I don't know. I have mixed feelings on that. I like that. Like I like that Peter would have died here if not for his relationship with Connors.
Yeah, but again, it would mean something if the character or relationship felt if we felt anything for it prior to this point.
Yeah, and
Like
that's the thing I don't like about it.
yeah, like it should be what this should be is like a great culmination of like a complex, nuanced hero villain relationship.
And I
What it
like
is
that
right
he had to with the arm that he had to grow back.
yeah. Right now, what it is just a neat self-contained moment.
Mm-hmm. And Webb not really being a comics guy, I I doubt very seriously that he had much of an interesting. I mean, like he certainly doesn't have an interesting take on. Well, I take that back. He certainly has a take on Electro, but
Is it the best take? Maybe not.
yeah, maybe not. But like generally speaking, I don't know if he has great takes in his head for them. He's not a comic guy like Raimi is.
Yeah, I don't know. The villains all around in these two movies are kind of really the weakest part. Like, even with Amazing 2, there's a lot of things in that movie that, more than this one, I think people can say makes for a weaker narrative. But so I think both this movie and especially that one would be much more well liked if the villains landed.
And here we have one of the biggest and kind of most blaring similarities to Raimi's first movie in that
Yep.
there's a promise that Peter doesn't really make to a dying character. But unlike that one, though, he doesn't really keep this. I mean, he struggles with it in the second movie, but for this movie as a piece, he doesn't really keep it.
Yeah.
We can talk about that because I don't know how to feel about that.
And again, does because just I get hung up on word choice. And the choice of words he uses is keep Gwen out of it. Not don't be with Gwen, don't let Gwen into your Spider-Man stuff. And he's going to interpret it very much the first way in the next movie. And I'm just not sure if I'm meant to agree with him about that.
Especially because, as far as we know, Gwen doesn't specifically like ask him what exactly he said. I mean, she paraphrases what what her dad says to Peter here.
But she wasn't here.
Yeah, she wasn't here, and she doesn't know exactly what he said. And I assume Peter never told her exactly what he said.
Yeah, because
So she can't even make the argument for him.
clearly Peter thinks he means don't be with her at all, or at least that's what we decide he thinks in the second movie. And so maybe that's what he told her. But I don't know.
But the problem is, if you're going to end this movie this way, he should. I kind of, given how they ended, I kind of hate that we do the promise thing at all, because I think that's the biggest argument. I love that. That's the little smile he gives. But yeah, I think that's the biggest argument, the most valid argument anyway, for this Peter being a jerk.
Yeah. That's the one leg I would say the people who make that criticism actually have to stand on.
In the eggs.
Such a sweet little moment.
Yeah.
But like, okay, so again, because I'm all about like offering alternatives, I guess, today, this is another case where it's like maybe what we're talking about should have been the sequel in the same way MJ realizing like the problems of dating a superhero should have been Spider-Man 3 building off Spider-Man 2, where if you want like make that conversation the crux of the next movie, where it's like have Peter interpret it differently. I think you retroactively make people kinder on his character in this movie and make Amazing 2 more compelling if the idea is Peter interprets Captain Stacy's words the way we're interpreting it. Don't not date Gwen at all, but if you're gonna be Spider-Man, leave her out of it, and maybe he has to choose between do I want to keep being Spider-Man or do I want to be with Gwen?
And the problem is that's not the choice he's making. He's not this movie.
Yeah, like in the second movie, that's not even the discussion. Like
Yeah.
I think like totally retool the next movie and make the crux of his arc choosing between do I pursue this person who's basically the love of my life, perfect for me in every way, or do I do the power responsibility thing?
And the biggest problem with how Peter handles it is, what's the difference between this scene and the scene of them in class together when he says those are the best times?
Yeah, like this is really the big issue is that like if he shows up at the funeral and has the those are the best kind thing, then it's less of an issue. But he can't say that after he didn't show up for the funeral.
Oh, not even just not showing up for the funeral. That he more or less goes along with what he thinks Captain Stacy's interpretation of what he said was, which is can't be with her at all. If that's how you feel, why are you suddenly going? You can't do this. You can't go with what you think he wants you to do, and then just go back on it for seemingly no reason.
I think this is a case where Mark Webb or the screenwriter has a better understanding of what's meant to be going on here than comes across on the screen.
Yeah, that needs to be more explicit. I like here that Gwen puts together. He made you promise, didn't he? Like she knows her father so well.
And again, she's just a smart person. She's intuitive.
And I hate that he doesn't answer her.
Yeah.
Like he, as we've established, he's not great with communication. Have him nod.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, again, the movie does have to stand on its own, and this is a problem in this movie. but I just can't help but thinking about how much less of a problem it would feel like looking back if we'd made that like discrepancy part of the second movie. At least have Gwen maybe bring up the argument of like, had no, but then it would be out of character for Gwen to ask him to stop being Spider-Man at that point. So
I like this little scene that May has with him and reassuring him.
yeah,
What I'm not too sure of is if he's saying I'm no good for her because he actually believes that, or is that just a lie that he is telling Aunt May because the real reason is he's Spider-Man.
I think it's a mix of the two. I don't think he means like I'm no good for her in the way that she's probably taking it. Like when he says I'm no good for her, Aunt May probably takes it as like he's belittling himself personally, as like he's not good enough for her or he's like a bad influence on her in some way. What he really means is I'm no good for her because if she's with me, then I'm going to give her a lot of emotional strain because I'm Spider-Man.
How do you feel about this really canny voiceover that Uncle Ben leaves as a voicemail as if he knows Peter's going to be Spider-Man before he dies?
I wish we'd heard the whole thing when he started listening to it earlier in the movie. Playing it here at the end feels a bit tacky.
Yeah.
Letting him just listen to it when he should have, because he starts listening to it and then I don't know if he stops or if the scene just cuts before it finishes, but I would have had him just let the audience and Peter just finish it when he starts listening to it the first time. But that moment with Flash was great.
Well, he says, I think it definitely does finish. That's the implication because he says, "You're my hero, and I love you," and then the music swells, and then we continue on with the rest of the scene. So I think the implication is, yeah, that was the whole thing.
No, no, no. I mean, earlier in the movie, he started listening to that before, and we
Yeah,
only hear
but
the ending of it
there
now.
is when he says, "You're my hero," like that definitely feels like the movie like has Uncle Ben knowing that Peter's Spider-Man before he makes that message.
True. And, like, I will say the "those are the best kind" line bothers me less remembering how Gwen herself reacts to it. Like, she herself is totally on board. And again, I just feel like I don't think it's necessarily that anything changed in between this movie and the second one. I just think the second one should have handled that aspect differently because we're going to get to the second one and Peter's going to be like on the fence about it, like leading her on and stuff and being like I don't know if I can actually do this. I would have just had it be the two of them, if they both mutually decide they want to keep being in a relationship, fine.
Comic
That
cover.
yes,
This
that
is
whole
comic
thing was
cover.
great.
I love that whole flaming scene.
Yeah, that was great. But like we'll talk about it more with the second one. But I'm just at a place right now where I'm like, it's fine if they're still in a relationship. If we make the conscious decision to make the second movie about the two of them talking about can we be in a relationship and you be Spider-Man, and make that a discussion for the two of them. And that's not really what we do. But that said, that's the movie. And again, I feel like I did a lot more complaining here than I wanted to. I think this is a really strong movie for the most part. I have almost nothing but good things to say about it, except for the main antagonist, which unfortunately leads to me spending a lot of time commenting on a movie that I like with problems, because he is a pretty big part of it.
Yeah. And this is the first Spider-Man movie with an actual post-credits scene.
Oh right, yeah. So we're gonna have to wait until that before we sign off, right?
Yeah, which is really frustrating because they don't ultimately. I mean, uh, the Mister Fierce guy is just um, just a proxy for setting up Sinister Six.
Yeah, you might as well name him Mr. Sony Pictures.
There's a Sinister Six movie coming. Ooh, be excited!
And honestly, the fact that we never eventually got to that makes it feel kind of pointless that we even kept Connors alive.
Yeah. But I mean, would you say that about Vulture?
No, but unlike because we'll get to it when we get to it, but the last we see of Connors prior to this scene is him pulling Peter up and going like the captain, and Peter leaves, and that's the last we see of Connors on screen. With like he could have fallen off of that building, and nothing afterwards would have been changed. Toombs being alive at the end of Homecoming, like scenes would have had to have been changed around if he died, and whether or not we see Vulture again, I really want to. It's a great character moment because Peter chooses to save him, and like yeah, like that's not the same thing. No. Like Vulture being alive at the end of Homecoming impacts that movie more than Connors being alive at the end of this one.
That is very true. Although it is, I mean, at the time it was certainly refreshing that we just didn't do that.
Plus, we can't ask Sony to see into the future and know that the Sinister Six doesn't ever get made.
Of
So,
course.
but yeah, I gave my kind of general thoughts. I really like this movie. Connors is the big problem, but it's a really good movie. I think it's a really nice, really well acted. All of the emotional beats hit. I find this version of Peter really compelling and the romance really charming and likable. And I don't know, I have the one big problem with it, and everything else I pretty much love. What about you?
I'm in a pretty similar spot. I I I grew up with Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, obviously, and while I do like him in the role, um, Andrew Garfield is um, he's a hell of a lot better. I mean, I don't even necessarily see them as two different characters. He's a great Peter Parker. He's a great Spider-Man. Um, and this movie is weirdly enough, I think, just as good and just as problematic as Raimi's first movie is.
Yeah,
Like there's like the flaws are few and far between. Um, but I, for as much as I like Raimi's movie, I like this movie. I am curious to like having played the PS4 game. Now that we finally have that, part of me wonders if this version would have been better remembered and Andrew Garfield would have been more well received by everyone in the role if they decided to skip the high school thing entirely and just do an adult Spider-Man.
it's possible. I know that some people, Cap included, went into this movie hoping that it would be a case where, well, not went into it, but like hearing that it would be rebooted, hoping that it would be a case where he's been Spider Man for a little while prior to the start of the story, and we don't get that until the MCU. But I don't know. I think this movie makes a really good case for doing the origin again and having Peter's journey into becoming a hero be the crux of the story. But maybe you're right. Like, whether or not it would have necessarily made for a better movie, would it have been better remembered if it wasn't like quote unquote treading old ground? Probably. But again, I think a lot of sort of people's feelings about this movie or what they think they feel about this movie comes from association with the second one. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that next time, in fact. So for now, thanks everybody for listening. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Did the commentary inform your opinion of the movie on this viewing in any way? I hope you enjoy and look forward to the next one. We are going to have a lot to say about the next one.